Hi everyone, and welcome to A Mighty Blazes YA panel. My name is Birdie Siegel, and I'm going to be a host and moderator today in talking to our extremely talented YA authors. So today we have with us Kat Spears, Phoebe North, Alex Richards, and Jennie Wexler. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't we just start by doing a short introduction. If you want to go around and just say your book title and give us maybe a short elevator pitch on what your book is about, just in case people don't know. So we can start with Alex.
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex. This is my book, When We're Strangers. It released yesterday. And a quick pitch, it's a YA contemporary about a girl whose father dies, and she soon finds out that he had been having an affair, and she sort of channels her grief and curiosity in a strange way. I'm like going to leave it super vague.
Awesome. Phoebe, we can go on to you.
First of all, happy book birthday, Alex.
Thank you.
It's exciting. I hope it feels good. I know it's always a little surreal. And I feel like our books are a little copacetic. My name's Phoebe North. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. And this is my book, Strange Creatures, which is about a brother and a sister and the imaginary kingdom they build in the woods together when they're kids. What happens when the sister thinks the brother's disappeared into it? And then what happens when he returns and she has to deal with the truth. And I'm not going to tell you what the truth is.
Awesome. Kat?
Hi, I'm Kat Spears, and my latest book is The Tragedy of Dane Riley. It's a contemporary reimagining of Hamlet. I usually just say it's Hamlet without the murders. But all the elements of Hamlet's soliloquies, to be or not to be, are in the book, with Dane Riley struggling with his day-to-day existence.
And last but not least, Jennie.
Sure. My debut novel is Where It All Lands. It came out on July 6th, and it is a sliding doors-esque contemporary story about love, loss, and all the what ifs in life. It centers on three musically gifted teens and two best friends meet the new girl on the first day of band practice, and they're instantly drawn to her. And to decide who gets to ask her out, they flip a coin. The story is told in parts heads and tails, and we get to see how each different chance plays out throughout the book.
It's so awesome. I'm so excited for all of your books. So congratulations to the newest editions. That's awesome. I want to say before we get started that A Mighty Blaze has put together a book giveaway for an unlucky individual to win this set of 4 YA novels. So please enter. If you go to our social media accounts for A Mighty Blaze, you will see instructions there. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to get right into our questions, which I'm very excited about. And we're going to start with Kat. Kat, on your bio, you actually wrote that you had a hard time during your teenage years. I think I'm quoting you when I say you're still trying to write your way out of it. I loved how you put that. So my question for you is, why did you choose to write YA, and how did your teenage years inspire you in your writing?
So I actually started writing YA books when I was a teenager, and I couldn't really find the books that I wanted to read that were dealing with the issues that I was facing as a teenager at that time. And so I used to just fill notebook after notebook after notebook of some really terrible books, all of which I've since burned in the backyard of my house, because I couldn't stand the idea of somebody finding them after I was gone. So you know, I mean, the characters in those books were struggling with all the things that my friends and I were struggling with. I always found the portrayal of young people so unrealistic in the YA that was available when I was a teenager. And I guess I just never got out of the habit of writing from those characters' perspectives and the things that they were facing. And sometimes I'll see reviews of my books and they'll say that it seems like such an unrealistic portrayal of teen years, that people never had any experiences like that. And I think, well, there's some people who did have those experiences that, you know, could connect to that, or who are having those experiences. So
I'll say I'm a 23-year-old and I still read YA because I think it sends the best messages and the most relatable for my life. So I definitely agree with you there. We're going to move on. Phoebe, I have read some of your books. You have such imaginative and fantastical storylines that I just don't know how you come up with it. So my question is, what are some of your inspirations for your stories, and what books and authors inspired you?
Oh man, I feel like my inspirations are going to sound very strange, which might explain why my stories are a little bit strange. Strange Creatures is fairly obviously super inspired by Peter Pan. The kingdom that the kids build in the woods is kind of like a Neverland-esque kingdom, but they kind of put their own spin on it, which was something I did as a teenager. And I think, I'm trying to think of like, I steal my ideas from books that I feel like I could have done that idea better sometimes. Sometimes it's albums I'm obsessed with. A lot of times they're just my own personal experiences that I kind of put little twists on so they're different and interesting and textured. I feel like ideas are all around us, and you just have to kind of get into the habit of plucking them out of the air, which it's very easy to get out of that habit if you're going through like a dry period of writing, but they're everywhere. And I feel like you can definitely see like this is Peter Pan plus being obsessed with Brian Wilson, which is a super normal thing, and just being a teenager who played out in the woods and was a little strange, and I feel like those really personal experiences are often the ones that oddly speak the most to other readers, even if they're not just like their experiences.
Do you have any authors or inspirations that since you were little, you just always thought, this is my go-to?
I feel like it's changed a lot. My first two books, Starglass and Starbreak, are sci-fi novels. My cat is walking across my desk, so there might be a cat in front of me. Just a moment, here he is. So a lot of my early influences were science fiction. I was a big fan of the Dragon Riders of Pern series. I wrote fanfic before Harry Potter was a thing. But I feel like with the last couple books, kind of more in a literary mode, and like Margaret Atwood's kind of experimentation and her voice is a huge influence on me. And I feel like that kind of keeps popping up in my books.
I think I could definitely see that from your books too, actually. That's awesome.
Thank you.
We're going to move to Jennie. Your character in your book moves kind of from place to place a lot. So I'm going to ask you about setting. How did you choose your setting? And do you have to do research before you write on what the place is like, where they go, all of that?
Well, Where It All Lands takes place in New Jersey, which is where I'm from. So I didn't have to do any research.
Awesome.
You don't really get the settings of the other places where Stevie has lived, all in New Jersey. So yeah, I took the easy road with that one.
Out there. Awesome. No, that works really well. I love that. Write what you know.
Yes.
So going to Kat, you talked about how your book is kind of a reimagining of Hamlet. So my question is, what in the world made you think to base a YA novel off of a Shakespearean tragedy?
Well, I didn't plan it, actually. Sometimes things show up in your writing that you don't plan for. And I was just reading an early draft of this book, and I thought, oh, well, this, it resembled Hamlet a lot, which actually made me go and spend just a year rereading Hamlet, reading like any critical theory I could get my hands on around Hamlet, kind of diving into the themes, which are eternal, questioning our reason for being here and why to get out of bed in the morning, and, why to keep going. And I always pictured Hamlet himself as, just this overindulged, entitled young guy. And so that's who Dane Riley is. But, he's struggling with these the play of Hamlet is, over 1,000 years old. And I just think it's cool that we're still asking ourselves the same questions as human beings now that we were 1,000 years ago. And nobody has any better answer now than they did then. So it's the themes that are in Hamlet are totally relatable, I think, just to any human, no matter what culture you live in or what time period you're living in.
As a follow-up question, how do you think that you modernized it? And how do you think, well, you kind of said it's relatable for all audiences, including young audiences, but like what ways did you go about modernizing it to make it appeal to young readers?
Well, I think that Jane spends a lot of time talking about, kind of the meaninglessness of things like social media, Instagram influencers, brands, and being obsessed with appearance and what people think of you. And, he even makes a statement at one point that it's like up to the rest of the world to tell you who you are based on what you present of yourself on social media. And so, he's focused on, and one of the other things that he says is like, after his father dies and he's thinking, okay, well, death is coming for all of us either way. So who cares what I'm wearing, and who cares, what people think of me, and who cares about high school? And which I think is a pretty relatable. Most people feel that at least once in their high school years, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's, Hamlet to a T, like the ultimate question: to be or not to be, right? Why keep living? And what's to prevent, what's going to happen when I'm on the other side? We don't know.
That's awesome. I love that answer. We're going to move on. Jennie, what message do you want your readers to get out of reading your novel? I know this is your first debut novel, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so the book really explores a lot of themes that, center on our choices in our lives and our chances and what happens to us versus what we choose. But at the end of the day, for me, what I want people to get out of it is that the overall message of the book is that, you can't really kind of reflect so much on what could have been, because it's really about the moment that you're living in and to truly live that moment. And that's really what I want people to take away from it.
So we're going to move on. Alex, all of your books involve some family relationships or loss of family in some way. What made you choose to use this theme in your book, and why do you think it's so important to address in YA literature?
I think it's just something that happens, and like it's not addressed in so much teenage literature. I think like it's important to show different ways that people can handle their grief, in both Accidental and When We Were Strangers. Yeah, it's just kind of showing that I guess like I wanted to sort of emphasize that even with the loss of a family member, like that the support system that you still have, and whether that be like reaching out to the people that you already have in your circle, or like finding new kind of found family along the way. Just that it's these are things that just so I think like with everything, like not feeling alone, like whatever, like when you're a teenager, just whatever you're going through, you're not alone.
That's great. I'm going to actually spread that question out for everyone, because all of your books kind of have to do with loss of someone important to you, or family relationships in some way. So what do you guys think too? You can start, Jennie.
Well, the question would be, in terms of grief in the novel, what do I want readers to get out of it?
Yeah.
So yeah, in Where It All Lands, it deals with the death of Peter. And I think for teens, it's really important to, I would just really like for someone to be able to find comfort in the story, really would mean the world to me. I mean, I could have really used this book when I was a teenager. And I think it's a really hard thing when a young person loses a peer. Obviously, when a young person loses anyone, but when a young person loses a peer, it's shocking, because it's really something that shouldn't be happening. I mean, none of it should be happening, but it's not the natural course of things. And it's a really hard thing to grapple with. So if someone could find comfort in my story, that would mean the world.
Awesome. Kat and Phoebe, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the themes of Jane Riley is that it's okay not to be okay. You don't every day. I think of the number of times that people ask me how I'm doing, and I say fine, and it's absolutely not true. And I remember once when my children were small, and I was just having a really tough week, day, life, whatever. And somebody stopped and asked how I was, and I started to give them an honest answer, and their eyes just kind of glazed over. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you actually wanted to know how I was. I was just supposed to say fine and go about my day. Yeah, it's okay not to be okay. Just because people look okay on the outside doesn't mean they're doing okay on the inside. And so you can't measure how well you're doing by how well it appears someone else is doing. And that was, that is, I feel like, the central message is that I gave Dane something terrible to grieve about, the loss of his father, but it doesn't take the loss of a loved one for you to be feeling sad or hopeless or all of the other things.
Phoebe, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm capable of writing a book that's not somehow about grief. We all have our things. I lost my dad when I was 8. And so a lot of my themes in my books are kind of reflective on that experience and how the experience of grief can compound other feelings of difference, whether it's like neurodivergence, whether it's gender or sexuality difference, whether it's just feeling like a weird person. And I think in Strange Creatures specifically, what I hoped readers would get out of it is the idea that even if you're grieving, even if you're strange, there's also communities that you can find out of those experiences. Because I remember always feeling very isolated because of those experiences as a kid. And we talk a lot about kind of queer pain in books, but part of queer joy is that we find communities through these formative experiences and through our issues of difference. And so that's what I hope kids will see, is that by talking authentically about what it's like to be a weird kid dealing with dark stuff, you will find your people and you will find ways out of it, and your experiences of being strange will kind of build you up.
That's great. I think all of your books are going to tell amazing stories. So my last question I have is, well, not my last question. My next question I have is for Phoebe. When you're writing, do you write before you begin writing, do you have a clear idea of how you want your story to go? Or does it just kind of start writing it?
That's a good question, especially looking at the form of this 560-page book. I always know how my stories will end. I don't always know how they'll get there. And often the way they'll end will change too. This book originally had a completely different ending. But other than that, I am totally a pantser. I have tried. That's the one who flies by the seat of their pants while writing. I've tried to learn how to write outlines. Recently, I tried to send my editor an outline for my next book. I was like, please, don't make me do this outline. I can't do it. He's like, that's okay. Just write the first, 10, 20 pages. We'll talk then. So I can't play. Some people have beautiful, like, Scrivener documents. Not me. And I've just learned to embrace that. That's okay. Takes a little longer, but you get there.
Disorganized writer. It's a great one. I love that. My question for all of you now is just going to be, and it's similar to yours, is did you know exactly what you wanted your book to be? Do you have different versions of your book or different endings of your book that you kind of had to decide halfway through what you wanted to do with them? Alex, did you have anything?
Yeah, I started out writing, not this book, but I started out being a writer with having no idea and being a total pantser, and I would write the book and then get to the end and be like, wow, okay, nothing happened. What was that about? So it was a nice exercise in creativity, but I definitely go by an outline, and the outline of this book that I submitted to my editor is very closely what it ended up being. I definitely was playing around with some different ideas in the beginning. Basically, I have to give a little bit more away of the story than I did in my initial spiel, but it's this teenage girl, and she ends up sort of kind of stalking / following this woman who who his father was seeing and was going to leave the family for. And I had sort of played around with the idea of like, oh, like the mom would be the one to go like stalking. And then I realized after, before I started writing, I was like, that's actually that's not enough information that's enough of a storyline for the protagonist. Like she would just be sitting in the back seat watching her mom kind of lose it while all this is going on. Really, like she really needs to be the one in the driver's seat, literally and metaphorically, for this all to work. So yeah, I definitely don't think I could do it without an outline. And I mean, there were definitely like scenes here and there that change. I mean, sometimes I'll name a character and then realize, oh, this character is going to have so much more to do with the story than I had initially anticipated. And it's for something as ridiculous as just like choosing a random name, like from the internet. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I want this character to like be a lot bigger in the story. But yeah, I usually stick pretty closely to my notes.
What about you, Jennie? Do you make an outline?
I am a pantser. I try to outline also, but I really, I don't know. I will have some sort of outline that I usually deviate from, but I'm similar to Phoebe in that I need to know the ending and the beginning before I start. But with Where It All Lands, I actually wrote the story linearly at first, and critique partners had read it, and people were kind of saying, "Oh, this coin toss is kind of interesting." I'm like, oh yeah, coin toss is interesting. And I was like, what if I just trash the whole thing and rewrite it in parts and make it really hard for myself? So I kind of just see where the story takes me. So yeah, total pantser.
Awesome. And you, Kat?
It's interesting. I always am fascinated because I feel like every writer is totally different. But I don't think of myself as a writer so much as a storyteller. Because I love to tell verbal stories. So, and I was a bartender for over 20 years, and that's just part of being a bartender is like these things happen, or you collect these stories and you recycle the same stories over and over and over again with different customers. And each time I tell the story, I'm perfecting it a little bit. I'm improving my timing. I'm improving, how much information I give or hold back at the beginning, so that the punchline hits harder. And then ultimately, I write my books the same way, but I'm doing it in my head. So I'm watching it like a movie, imagining it happening for sometimes 6 months or a year. And so when I finally sit down to write it, I mean, I know what's going to happen and what the characters look like and what they're going to say and how they're going to act because I've watched it like a movie that, you rewind, edit a little bit, play it again in your mind and over until, I'm ready to put it on paper. So
many different ways to write a book is what I'm meaning. That's awesome. We actually have a fan question. So someone's asking, will you keep writing YA or try to expand to other genres? Who wants to take that one first?
I can go first. I'm open to young adult and adult. So for me, it depends on whatever story pops in my head. Because if the story lends itself to young adult, then I'll write a young adult story. But if I have an adult story that's kind of simmering, I might want to write that. So either or.
Okay, Kat, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of story ideas that I would like to develop into that would be adult books, but I feel like the young adult voice is so authentic and it's so much more open to the depth of emotion that I want to reach in my stories that I might be there for another little while. It'll be hard for me though because all my protagonists so far have been boys, 17 or 18-year-old boys. And so, I mean, I think it would just be revolutionary if I wrote it from a young woman's perspective, but I haven't reached a level of comfort yet with that. As much as people associate the protagonist with the author anyway, I haven't reached that level of comfort to portray a teenage girl. So we'll see.
Okay, interesting. Phoebe, you've already kind of written different genres. This one seems a little bit from your side.
I have, and I have to admit that I've been cheating on YA. I spent the winter finishing an adult manuscript, and we'll see what happens with it. It's exciting. It's even longer than this book as a manuscript, so we'll see. But I always love writing teenagers, and that's kind of similar to Strange Creatures, a multi-voice kind of thing. And one of the plot lines is teenagers. It's from a teen perspective, even though it's an adult book. And I love kind of that freshness, but it was a fun experiment to write about kind of grown-up concerns, things that teenagers would not want to read about, like, you know, do I stick with my wife kind of questions. So it was kind of felt fresh to me. You know, writing about people kissing for the first time when they've kissed other people, that kind of thing feels revelatory after writing just YA for about a decade. I like experimenting and doing new things anyway. So
I love that. I'm really excited to hear more about this. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I just like Phoebe, what you just said, you know, about like writing about stuff like that, because my book has a lot to do with infidelity. And I was kind of like, I don't know, is this going to be, our teens going to be like, oh, what, who cares? Like, but I think it's something, you know, that a lot of teens are going through, like, as far as, you know, parents, like almost everybody that I, you know, was friends with in high school, like their parents had split up and stuff. So it's just, I think, but as far as the actual question, like, I love writing teen stuff. And I think that it's important to take any topic, like teens. I think that some people have the perspective that you need to like dumb it down to write for teens, which is absolutely not true. And teens are totally capable of like handling any topic. And I kind of like pushing that boundary, and I can't really see myself changing out of this genre, just kind of continuing to find things that are like heavy, almost like adult topics, and then finding that way to like to make it perfect for the teen audience.
Well, one of my questions I have for you, which we kind of talked about, Kat, is what do you think are the similarities and differences in your protagonists or your other characters, and how much do you think you draw from real life experiences or real life people? Phoebe, do you want to talk?
Well, I mean, I steal stories all the time from behind the bar. So, you know, people will be talking with their best girlfriend and, you know, telling them the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to them. And then I steal that story and I put it into a book, and it happens to one of my characters. And I think that most of the protagonists are a part of me. They're not all of me, but they're a part of me. Because I'm, you know, I always say I don't think I'm a good enough writer to write in third person. Like, people who can effectively write in third person and still suck me into a story. You know, I'm inspired and awed by them, because I don't think of myself. I feel like if it's not that me, and I'm not exploring something so deeply personal where I'm telling you just like I'm telling a friend, that it would be difficult for me, because I'm not a trained writer. You know, I mean, I've never taken a writing class. I never passed English in high school. I'm not, you know, a person who's trained to be, I can only write what I know and what I've experienced and what I am trying to figure out from things that have happened to me. So like in my first novel, Sway, the main character is this horribly reprehensible person, but he's that way because he has shut down feeling. You know, he's just decided to kind of go without emotion and not react or respond emotionally to the world around him. So, I mean, that sounds appealing to me sometimes to think of the world in that way. So, so yeah, my characters are not me, but they are definitely inspired by me and people I've known and been close to in my life.
Because like you were saying before, I think authors are very often compared to their protagonists. So I'm sure you do get this question very often in your interviews of where did you get the similarities and differences from? Jennie, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. You know, this story is very loosely inspired by experience I had in high school. So yeah, there's some elements in there that are familiar. But Stevie, who's the main character, one of 3 points of view, has similarities to me in that we both played the saxophone in high school, but she's probably much cooler than I ever was, and takes a lot more risks than I ever did at that age. But yeah, I mean, I think every writer, when you write, things kind of fall in there that are, you don't even know you're doing it, but things from your own life definitely get into your words, because it just naturally happens. But yeah, I'm not any of the main characters.
Alex, Phoebe, did you have anything to say on this one?
Yeah, I think of writing, this sounds very woo, but a little bit like dreaming, because when we're dreaming, we're usually dealing with problems in our real life, but all of the details get mixed up and kind of turned around and used in new ways so that our brains can kind of deal with it and deal with those conflicts we're having and sort those memories the way they should be sorted. So I think like everything in my books is from my life. There's nothing in my books that has not come from my life. But at the same time, they're kind of all mixed up in this new package and in ways where I feel like I can kind of tackle these problems that I've dealt with in life through fiction. That being said, yeah, I agree with Kat that people will ask, like, am I this character in your book? And no, the characters are all me, they're all kind of thought experiments for myself. Maybe I'm empathizing with people I know, even if they're not great people or whatever, they're in there. And it's interesting because I have a lot of people with strange creatures asking me if I'm Annie, who's probably the main POV character. And she's not the one that I identify the most with at all. And so I think that's interesting that people assume one character is more like you, maybe because of physical details, things like that, than other characters. And often that's not the one that feels the closest to you emotionally. I think it's interesting.
It definitely is. Alex, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I love representing insecurities. I think that like there's so many, like as far as when I was a teenager, I felt like I didn't fit in, and they're just indifferent. I felt like I was always trying to. I was insecure about a lot of different things, and I just really like bringing that into the characters, in both characters, even though like I don't relate personally to like some of the storylines like that are going on in the books, but and especially in When We Were Strangers, she comes to like find photography as like a really big help in her life and like a path to kind of helping her find a little bit of peace and moving on. And I studied photography in high school, and I just find it like to be, I don't know, it's just cool. I guess like as far as, Jennie talking about saxophone, like that was like my big, and I knew all the photography references and things that I was putting into the book. And I just found that really cool. And it was like very like therapeutic, I think, for me in high school to do photography. And it's very much so for my protagonist.
We have another fan question. Someone's asking, what kind of music did you listen to when you're writing? Do you guys have those specific playlists that you were listening to when you were writing your novels, or a specific song that you had on repeat? Pat, I know you have such an edgy book. I feel like there's got to be some particular song.
Yeah, I actually do playlists on Spotify. The only playlists that are public on my Spotify account are the ones that are songs I listen to when I'm writing, or they're songs that usually if a character references a specific song, I have heard it while I'm typing, because but sometimes I will have a song, I'll be in such a groove with writing, and I will listen to the same song just on repeat because for whatever reason in that moment, that song is doing it for me. And I'll listen to that same song over and over and over in a single writing session, 10, 12, 14 times to get the mood of that particular piece. But I think my Spotify account, I think it's Cat Books. And so there's, for each of my titles, there's a playlist with the songs that either the characters are referencing in the book or that I listen to when I'm writing it.
Love that. Did anyone else listen to a particular song when they were writing?
I'm very similar to Kat. Like, you guys are talking, I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I do. There's a lot of music referenced in Where It All Lands, and I listen to a lot of the songs similarly on repeat, especially if it's a song central to a scene. I just can't write while there's music playing with the lyrics. I can't do it at the same time because I get too distracted. So before I write a scene, I will play a song multiple times and then write the scene. But I use music a lot in my writing. The same reason Kat says, it just helps me to get into a character's head or mood or something, whatever I need to be getting down on the paper.
Yeah, I listen to a lot, and there's like a lot of Spotify playlists. Like when you look through like for like music to work to, there's like a deep focus playlist and soundscape for gaming, which I don't know how I even stumbled upon that, but I did, and I'm like, yeah, this actually is perfect. Because like music that's instrumental, like I also can't listen to it words. It just is too distracting. But I also have a playlist. I have playlists for each of the books with like songs that they reference and just songs, because there's a lot of like, they talk about playlists in the book. And so I have like the soundtrack to the book, but I can't listen to it while I'm working. It's like too different, like my zone.
I'm going to reveal myself in case there was any doubt as a total hipster. I have a very kind of rigid writing process where I need to listen to music in order to write. Like I've created some kind of Pavlovian response. And I listen to either records or cassette tapes. I have my boombox right behind my computer here. And I do that because it's a set length of music so that I take breaks at the beginning and end. And I have like an actual act where I push a button or put the needle down to start writing. And so music is key to that. And I have a very big obscure music collection. There's a scene in Strange Creatures where two girls make out to a Beach Boys bootleg, and it's an actual bootleg. So I got to listen to that while drafting and editing it, which was fun. And I got to explain to my editor that, yes, you can get records that are bootlegs. And yes, this is a real bootleg. Do you want to listen to it? Which was kind of fun to give him a little bit of an education in Beach Boys bootlegs of all things. Because why have that knowledge?
When you said Brian Wilson earlier, I was like, surely she's not talking about the Beach Boys Brian Wilson.
No, I am talking. It's a very normal thing for 16-year-old girls to be obsessed with it. Yeah.
That's so great.
It's funny that, sorry to interrupt you, but I can write listening to music, and I actually like to be in a really loud bar or coffee shop or something when I write, because the noise around me forces me to hyper-focus when I write, but I can't edit that way. So if I'm reading to edit or going through my manuscript, I want absolute silence. Like even if the cicadas are chirping, I'm like, oh my God, but for writing, I can have so much noise. I could write in the middle of a rock concert, no problem.
That takes some talent, I would think.
I think it has something to do with my like somewhat ADD way of functioning, is that because it requires you to hyper focus to cancel everything else out, it helps me to do that.
Well, someone is asking, who are your biggest supporters in your writer? Do you have family members or a team? I mean, maybe editors, things like that, who really support you all the way through the process?
I'll go first. My debut book Accidental came out last year, and I joined the Facebook group of like debut authors, and there's tons of people in the group, and it's a really great place to like go and kind of share your highs and your lows, and that has been really helpful. And then like within that, I sort of like made some specific writing friends, and we have like a writers group now, and we have like text chains, and I would say that they are probably some of like my biggest in addition to like family, but yeah, it's really nice to have like a support system of other writers, because they really know what you're going through. When something great happens or something bad happens, they can understand it in a way that like that your family is kind of like just doesn't quite get it as much.
What about you, Jennie?
Same. I'm really lucky to have a very nice group of writer friends who have sort of been there from the beginning. And then of course my family is so supportive, and my son cheers me on too, which is really cute. And sometimes I'll throw ideas out to him, because sometimes like an 8-year-old's brain can just like give you a solution that you never would have thought of. So that's also really helpful.
Well, and a lot of you are parents, which is kind of what I was going to ask, is what is it like kind of writing for YA while watching your kids grow up? Is it kind of interesting to think, oh goodness, I hope that they don't go through this, or they're not in this stage?
I mean, I definitely, my son's not a teenager yet, but it definitely affects how I write for teenagers, because, I think about how the material would come across to a teenager, someone, hits so close to home. So it definitely, it's a big responsibility writing for teens. And I take it seriously that, it should be a learning process for them too, like learning through stories. I think it's how we all learn about a lot of things in life, is through stories. So
my older two are old enough my youngest one certainly could read any of my books. She's smarter than the rest of us, but my older two are teenagers, and I think that because I struggled with some of the things that Dean struggles with, depression and stuff in high school, that it makes me hyper conscious of my son. Like, are you okay? Are you doing all right? How are things? I'm always maybe going too far to try to make sure that he's, because he's 15 now, and he wasn't able to go to school during the pandemic, and it really wore him down. And so I'm always nervous and always like thinking, and it's funny because I'll see people like, oh, wow, this seemed like a pretty accurate portrayal of depression and grief and mental health in this book. And I'm thinking, yeah, it is an accurate portrayal. And everybody experiences it differently, and everybody shows different outward signs or no outward signs at all. So, but yeah, it's I don't think that, because they're my kids, so they're never gonna, even if they think I'm a pretty cool mom, maybe they're not gonna be as open with me as they would be with their friends. So it's my experience as a teenager, not theirs, but I hope that they feel like they can relate to me better through it.
My 7-year-old daughter is by far my biggest fan, and I'm very lucky because I have a very supportive agent and editor who are down for any of the very weird ideas I want to write, and my spouse tolerates me talking at him about plot problems. But my daughter is just, I go to pick her up from school and she's showing all the teachers my book trailer, and she's like counting down the days until she's old enough to be able to read the book. I told her when she's 13. She's funny though. She has a wonderful imagination, will probably be some kind of creative person. She is a creative person, but some kind of creative herself. And she likes to tell me things like, you really should write more books about dragons, Mom. You just really need to. That's what I want to read about, and that's what kids like now. So yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Awesome. One of our fans are asking, do you guys ever think about making movie adaptations? And if you did, do you have a star cast in mind that you would want for your particular book?
I would say if this ever got turned into a film or a TV show, like you would all hear me like screaming at the top of my lungs all over New Jersey. I don't know. It's such a that would be just wild. I don't know.
But you would be open to it.
Oh my God. I think we would all be open to it. Yes.
I know sometimes I'll read books with the idea of it, reading it like a movie in my mind. So do any of you guys ever write that way, thinking, oh, if this was a movie, this is how the scene would go, kind of thing?
I mean, I write like that always. And I think I forget who was saying, maybe it was Kat who was saying it. When I write, I don't see the whole thing at once. I wish I did. That would be amazing. But I see scenes as if it's a movie scene, and then I just write what I see. So I wish I could envision the whole book at the same time. That would be amazing.
That'd be pretty cool. For our last question, do you have any advice for young writers out there that want to write YA as well? Alex, did you have anything?
I mean, I feel like advice, it's just read a lot. I feel like I sort of end up saying the same thing over and over again. It's like, read a lot, read in different genres, see if you can get creative partners, like people that you can show your work to, like beta readers, and just people that you feel like comfortable, like just bouncing ideas off with, and that can be your support network, I think is really important, because it's really, writing is really, really hard. I guess another piece of advice is be good at social media, because that is something that I don't feel like was ever told to me. Like, you have to be on Instagram and or Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, all these different things, and you really have to be like pushing yourself out there. And it's hard, because you think, I'm writing a book, that's all I have to do, right? And turns out it's not all you have to do.
I'm so sorry. Did anyone else?
I think that's something people don't really talk about much, is that being able to write a book and edit a book and complete a book is totally different than having the drive or interest or willingness in self-promoting, which after 4 books, I love opportunities like this where I can get together with a group of people and chat about our books, or presenting at a conference or something. But just like going up to a stranger and saying, here, pick up my book and buy it and read it, it still feels icky and wrong and horrible. So, it's not all going to just be about the craft. But my advice is that I never showed another living soul any of my fiction until I had been writing for 25 years. And the first book I showed another person was my debut novel. So, write for yourself, write because you love to do it, write because it helps you in some way, but don't write just because you want to be a published author, because that ultimately could just lead to a lot of disappointment, and people always ask, would you still write if you didn't publish? I'm like, well, I did it for 25 years without publishing. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything?
I would want to tell young writers to don't be afraid to write the book that scares you, because I think I talk to a lot of writers who have ideas that are big and ambitious and weird. And I feel like a lot of times then you go onto Twitter or blogs and you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this in an elevator pitch. The market doesn't want this kind of book. And you kind of talk yourself out of those ideas. And a lot of times in those ideas are the books that only you can write and no one else can write them. And those are the books that I want to read as a reader. So please, everyone, write them for me. And I just think we need more books that are totally unique and different and speak to those personal experiences. So don't be afraid to do the weird thing. The weird thing's often the right thing.
Yeah, and don't listen to the people who tell you it's a bad idea or that you're not the person to achieve it, or I'm talking to you, Mom. But, my mom was like, well, you got to be realistic. Like you're not going to be a person who can publish a book, and that's not a realistic.
We're here to write fiction. We shouldn't be realistic.
Yeah, right. So, don't listen to your parents. I guess that's advice number 1. I'm kidding. But if I listened to my mom, God only knows what I'd be doing right now, like fixing typewriters or something, what she thought was going to be a stable, safe, secure way for me to work in the 40-hour-a-week government job that I should have, instead of having multiple careers that I've loved,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to all of you for being here. Everyone, please check out these amazing novels by Alex Richards, Matt Spears, Jennie Wexler, and Phoebe North. And please check out A Mighty Blaze's social media accounts for more exclusive interviews, and check out our book giveaway, because you're getting free books, and that's amazing. So everyone, thank you so much again, and we will hopefully see you soon.
Thanks, Birdie.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.